Hi, everybody. Coach Jay Ridgeway here. Excited to bring you the next edition of the Endurance Life 360. Today, I've got a great special guest here connecting with us over on the East Coast, Tommy Zaferes, former professional elite triathlete, um, current World Triathlon photographer, as well as USA Triathlon Talent ID scout for their national program, and a father. But also too, husband to Olympic bronze medalist from the Tokyo Games 2020, Katie Zaferes. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jay. This is awesome.
Yeah, very cool to have you on. I know we're going right into the heart of the Christmas holiday season and pushing into the new year, but I know we got some exciting stuff kicking off the new year, so I wanted to kind of bring you on in. There's a lot to cover here. We're going to try to do this to the audience, hopefully within 40, 45 minutes or so. So let's just kind of dive on in. Why don't you kind of talk about, you and I cross paths through USA Triathlon for a couple athletes that I'm coaching now. And, can you describe what your role is? We'll go back in your history here in a little bit, but let's kind of talk about what you're doing now because you got a lot going on. You're wearing multiple hats.
Yeah, so currently, if we just focus on the USA Triathlon portion of my life, I'm in charge of the Talent ID program, which encompasses the collegiate recruitment program, the high school recruitment program, and para triathlon. So those three different programs are all intertwined, meaning that I'm recruiting collegiate athletes, high school athletes, and para triathletes kind of all at the same time. And how you and I crossed paths were through the high school recruitment program, where I basically work with the data analysis. I was doing this all manually before, and thank God for him because he'll rip the data from all the run results from cross country, from track and field, from across the whole United States, from regional championships, from national championships, from everything, and then cross reference those names with Swim Cloud and USA Swimming. We get a Excel spreadsheet that has hundreds of names on it, and then I go through individually to find out if the names that show up on that list are the same athlete. And that takes a lot of research to figure that out. And then
I'll
if
bet.
we find it's the same athlete and both the times, the run times and the swim times hit world standards, then I go through the process of finding out what school they go to, the athletic director, their cross country coach, or their swim coach, getting in touch with them, sending a letter, and then saying like, hey, you're one of very few athletes, like basically five athletes in the whole United States who hit these metrics. We believe that you could be a future medalist in the sport of triathlon. So would you be interested in having a conversation? And if they're interested, then they email me and then we set up a Zoom call. And if all things go well with that Zoom call, then we invite them out to a camp. We get them set up with gear. We get them to a camp and then they head to their first race. And we see what happens at the race, but then we basically try to connect them with a local coach or a coach in their area to help develop their skills. And ideally, they fall in love with the sport of triathlon, and then we kind of progress them through the ranks. And it's kind of a next step basis where, depending on what happens, we kind of give feedback and mentorship and guidance on what the next steps should be for them specifically in terms of race schedule and coaching and development and college choices and athletics and all kinds of stuff. So we just talk to pretty much every opportunity that is available for them. And then, yeah, we see what happens and see what they want to do.
Yeah, no, that's what you just said in like the 2 minutes. They're just completely overwhelming with the amount of data that you have to vet through, and just the sheer numbers. Because again, like you said, you're doing youth, which leads into junior. You're doing collegiate, which is a whole another completely wide open field, right? Because now it's now an NCAA sport, at least for women, right? And it's growing on the club level for the men. And then you have the whole Paralympic athletes as well too, which again, former athlete of mine, Mohammed, who's on Team USA now, and just the whole dynamics that goes that. So where do you find time to do all that, let alone the second part of that? What else are you doing? Right?
Yeah, so the second part of that is I'm a content producer for World Triathlon. So at all the highest level World Triathlon races, I write interview questions, I interview athletes, I make videos with the videographers, I do introductions, and I work a lot of behind the scenes things for content that's coming out either during the live shows or just that we'll use later. And then one of the biggest things is I'm a photographer for World Triathlon. So at all the races, I'm shooting every single race and getting all the content for the athletes, for the sponsors, and yeah, for pretty much any usage that World Triathlon could possibly think of that they need imagery. I'm the guy that is kind of capturing that stuff. Same thing for federations as well. So there's different federations who work with World Triathlon to get their athletes to have like national team profile photos, or like if they have a magazine come out or whatever. Yeah, those images are going to the federations to be able to utilize. So I work as a contractor at those events. So I don't work full time for World Triathlon. I just work at the one-off events at the championship series, and then maybe a couple World Cups along the way. But it always has to work out with my wife's schedule, because my wife is a professional triathlete, as Jay introduced, I believe. And
Yeah.
so yeah, she won 2 medals in Tokyo, and she's racing at all the highest level races. So it works out well that we're able to take our son. And but then the dynamic of that is she's racing and I'm working. So then we need to bring extra set of hands to watch Kimble. So either we have a parent or a cousin or an aunt or a friend or somebody just off the street that we find. Just anybody that can come and take care of Kimble while we're both working at those events. And then that like takes up 7 weeks of the year. So outside of that, yeah, I really love the World Triathlon part of it, and it really helps me do my job because I'm staying full on in touch with the highest level of the sport of triathlon, which I'm trying to recruit for. So
Yeah.
I'm friends with all the top athletes, like Katie's training group. Like I train with them when we're on training camps. I know the level of what the best athletes in the world are doing right now. So I know what to look for future athletes coming through. So I think it benefits my job big time, and it's definitely worth doing all the double work where I'm still trying to keep my inbox clear and setting up Zoom calls on different time zones around the world and and shooting these events. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty
well,
busy.
my 2 cents to the audience, like you say, yeah, I'm kind of doing this over here somewhat full time, and then I'm kind of doing this as part time. But I know when you and I were first communicating early this year, you were in some other area versus where your home is in North Carolina. And we'll talk about a second where you grew up, because you grew up just south of me, where I grew up in the Bay Area. But you combine all that together, that's like an insane schedule, especially with the travel that's involved, the time zones that are involved. You and I were connecting at one point when you were in France, or I can't even remember where you were in Europe. But yeah, the challenges of that. Kimble, is your son with Katie? How old is Kimble, by the way? How old is he now?
Kimball's almost 18 months, so almost
Yeah.
a year and a half.
Yeah, so like you said before, you went out grocery or Christmas shopping with him, and he didn't want to walk, so you're carrying around kids. So yeah, you guys have got the full enchilada, for the lack of a better description, going on, and it's just mind-boggling to me because Katie's obviously trying to punch her ticket back to the Paris Olympics, which is obviously coming in to the end of the summer, July, August next year. So a lot going on. So let's take a step back though. What's really interesting to me is that the roles that you're playing right now, you have complete credibility of being in those spots because you did that as an athlete. So let's talk about that, because you're now in charge of the Talent ID program. You step back into your career, which goes into what, the early 2000s or so, and then really matures in the once you get to 2010, 2012, 13, 14, 15, you're competing at a very, very high level. And that continued on for what, another 10 years or so. Kind of like, let's talk about that. Where did you grow up? More importantly, where did you grow up? Because you're now in North Carolina, the East Coast, and then kind of how did you get involved in the sport, and were you part of the Talent ID program, if there even was one back in the day? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in Santa Cruz, California. So
Woo.
basically Central California along the coast, just south of San Francisco. And yeah, I got into triathlon because gas was expensive. So I'll rewind a little bit. I was a swimmer my entire life. So I swam at the Olympic trials in 2008, retired from swimming. I swam 200 butterfly, 100 butterfly, 200 IM at the Olympic trials. After that, I was like, all right, never swimming again. I'm like done with this. This is like too much of my time. Yeah.
Wait, what? So, what age were you, or when you were doing that? Was that collegiately, and if so, where were you collegiately at that point?
Yeah. So actually, I was homeschooled and graduated when I was 14 from high school and took
Oh
some
wow.
junior college courses and basically just continued on going to junior college to get my first 2 years of school out of the way. And I went to Cabrillo College, which was, I swam for Cabrillo Threshers club team. And at this stage was like 2006. And so I had 2 years before the Olympic trials. And at this stage, I was ranked second in the United States in the 200 fly. So I was like, I don't want to change anything. Like I honestly, I really hated school. I absolutely hated it. The only reason I was going to do it is like to go to swim. But I wanted to continue to swim with my club coach through Olympic trials. And so I got my AA degree from junior college in philosophy of all things. And then I was like, oh yeah, like I'll go back to school and like finish my degree later. But I just want to like swim through Olympic trials like with my club coach. And so I did that. I just trained, ended up having a terrible race at Olympic trials, didn't even make finals, and was not close to making the Olympics. And that dream was kind of dead. And then when I finished swimming in 2008, retired from swimming officially, like filled out all the USAT forms so I didn't have to get drug tested all the time anymore. That was my official retirement. I was like, all right, sweet. Now I'm going to go back to school. And then I looked at like how expensive it was and like remembered how much I hated it and like was trying to like figure that out. And I was like, ah, man, I'm just like not going to go back and I'm just going to figure it out. So I ended up starting to coach swimming at the high school level, club level, and collegiate level. And then was also working in the produce department at Safeway. So I was working at a grocery store, coaching swimming, and just like surfing and skateboarding every day. Kind of like, well, this is fine. Like I'm just like passing the time, like whatever. Didn't really think too far ahead of like what that would look like. But then gas was super expensive in California, so I decided to buy a bike so that I wouldn't have to pay for gas driving anywhere. So I bought a bike from my friend's dad, and that week, a friend's dad saw like, hey, I saw that you bought a bike, like, or I saw you riding your bike, like, are you doing the triathlon this weekend? And I was like, what triathlon? And it turned out one of my old junior lifeguard instructors was the race director, and so they gave me a free entry to this race. And I didn't even know like swim, bike, run. I didn't know what it was. And I just thought, oh, it would be fun. And this was in like the end of 2008, I believe. So I'd like retired from swimming in July, and then this race was in like September. And so I did zero training for it whatsoever. I hadn't even swam. Like I was just like, oh yeah, like I did junior lifeguard, so I ran on the beach. Like I have this bike now that I like ride across town. And then yeah, I swam for like my whole life. So how hard is swimming? And so I was gonna do the race in skate shoes, like in some Vans, but my mom was like, "Nah, you gotta get some proper running shoes." So she bought me running shoes the day before the race. I'd never worn them before. Ended up doing this race and loved it. But it was one of those where I was like first out of the water, get on the bike and think I'm crushing it, and then these guys on their TT bikes with aero helmets just come flying by me, and like I was standing still. I'm like, what in the world is happening? Because I thought I was like the fastest. I thought I was gonna win the race because I was like so far ahead in the swim, but then I was like, whoa, this is like a whole nother level. So after that race, I think I finished 10th overall or something like that. And I was like, all right, this race next year, I will not lose this race. I'm going to win this race. And so I like saved my money, bought a nice specialized like triathlon bike, like TT bike, got the aero helmet, and trained specifically for that race the next year. But then the next year, same thing. I was first out of the water, had a pretty big lead, and I was following the lead van. They didn't have a motorcycle; it's just a local race. And I had my head down, like looking at my aero bars, just trying to stay aero, like riding. And a police officer thought the lead van was a car that wasn't supposed to be on the course, so they jumped out in the middle of the road and was like, "Stop, stop!" And so the van came to a screeching halt. I had just looked down, and when I looked back up, the van was just at a complete stop, and I just ran straight into the back of it.
Oh
like
my God.
Thinking back, I was like, man, that's so dumb. How did that even happen? But like, yeah, I was new and I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, I was in the newspaper because of this, and because of this, 2004 Olympian Victor Plata, who lives in Santa Cruz or lived in Santa Cruz at the time, he saw me in the newspaper and was like, I need to coach this guy. So he contacted me and was like, hey, I want to coach you. Like there's this thing called draft legal triathlon where you're a swimmer, you'd automatically be in like the front group. And I want to coach you like to the Olympics. And so then to me, I was like, oh, this is another chance to go to the Olympics. I didn't even know triathlon was in the Olympics. So yeah, we got connected. He started coaching me.
Victor,
at that,
well done.
Do you remember Victor?
Oh yeah. Well done, Victor. Nice.
Yeah. So he was doing the talent IDing at that stage from a newspaper bike crash in the middle of a triathlon. But at that same time, like literally a week later, I had a friend who I grew up with, but no longer lived in Santa Cruz. He lived in Southern California. He happened to be in town that weekend. visiting his family, and he went to a master's swim program at UCSC, University of California, Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
At that master's swim program was Bevan Doherty, who's a two-time Olympic medalist in
Yeah.
triathlon. He had
Yeah.
just moved to Santa Cruz, like literally just moved there like a couple days ago, didn't know anybody, and happened to swim in the same lane with my buddy, who's never in Santa Cruz, but just happened to be there that one day. And so my buddy gave him my contact info. It was like, oh, hey, like, yeah, I can't swim with you, but my buddy Tommy just started triathlon and he went to Olympic trials. Like, he'd love to swim with you. So then I get a phone call from this two-time Olympic medalist. This was like literally 1 week after Victor contacted me, who is another Olympic triathlete. And so these two guys I got in touch with at the same time when I was first starting the sport, and I had like the best mentorship team growing up in the sport. So that's like obviously a little bit longer probably than what you needed, but that's how I got
Well, I mean,
involved.
to the audience, I knew zero about this. I mean, Tommy, you and I have obviously established a pretty good rapport thus far, but I knew zero about that. It just, wow. I mean, so let's fast forward. So this is, my mind's going all over the place. So you have somehow serendipitously fell into the lap of two iconic triathlon legends, and now they're mentoring you. So how does that go? What happens?
Yeah, so it was actually a pretty cool situation because I got the best of both worlds. Because I got Victor, who was kind of a self-coach guy, like domestically and like in the US was established. But
Yep.
then I had this next stage level of Bevan Doherty, who's internationally, he's now in the World Triathlon Hall of Fame. So
Yep.
it was kind of the perfect stepping stone where I got to work with Victor for about a year. And like I would swim with Bevan all the time, but Bevan actually didn't allow me to ride with him for almost a year because he's like, "You're brand new. I don't want you crashing me out," like sort of thing. But like at swimming, we would talk about triathlon, talk about races, and like I would follow him, of course, and like he would win some major races, and we talk about that stuff. So on the like I don't want to say internal side, but not the physical side of things, Bevan was mentoring me about triathlon, and then Victor was mentoring me on the physical side, the training side of things. And so then after about a year, I became more established, and I saw Bevan randomly out on a ride, and then we just started talking. And then after that stage, when he saw I knew how to handle a bike, I could carry on a conversation riding at his pace. He started inviting me on rides. And so once that happened, I kind of transitioned from working with Victor to working more with just doing training with Bevan.
Yeah.
And then at that same time, Bevan had other athletes. So Chris Gemmell, who's the director of marketing for World Triathlon, who I work with now, he actually came out to train with Bevan. This was back in 2011, and with a couple other high-level international triathletes. So we were all training together in Santa Cruz. I was like, my mind was blown that I had this opportunity. But both those guys, Chris Gemmell and Bevan, were like, all right, you need to get to Europe to get on a French Grand Prix team and start racing draft legal triathlon, because that's where like the sport really is. Like there's no race opportunities in the US, especially like draft legal focused. It's all about Ironman and non-drafting. So if you really want to make the Olympics, you need to get over to Europe. So Chris Gemmell got me on a French team. I got a contract with them. They had a hotel sponsor, so they flew me out to France. I had a place to stay, to live for free, and train with their group. And then go to the different French Grand Prix races, as well as racing some World Triathlon races over the next couple years. So that will be the first stage of this answer for you, of how that transition kind of went.
How old were you at that point?
Yeah, so I was about 24. So when I started triathlon, I never even raced junior youth or U23 or anything because I didn't find out about the sport till later. I wish I had found out about it earlier, which is kind of a cool full circle thing, because now that's what I'm doing. I get to introduce the sport to these young high school athletes who never knew it existed, and it's changing their lives. So I wish I could go back and know what it was much earlier. I think that would have changed my life as well. So
well, I mean, to put perspective of wrap around that. So you're coming into the sport 2008-ish, right? Well, the Olympics had only been around 2000. Sydney Games is when it became an Olympic medal sport. So 2004 was what, Athens, and then 2008 was what, Beijing.
Beijing, yeah.
Yeah, so really it was only on its third cycle in terms of an Olympic medal sport at that point. So it was still new, right? It was an Olympic medal sport, but from a domestic US standpoint, completely not on everybody's radar, right? And so now fast forward to kind of bringing you along, because you had some success there, and I want to overstep that, but now, here we are going to 2024. the sport has been around for 24 years in terms of an Olympic medal sport, which is mind blowing to me because I remember when it was just so exciting to say, oh my God, triathlon's an Olympic medal sport at the Sydney Games, right? Fast forward now, it's 24 years now, which is crazy. That said, you get mentored, you're competing in Europe, you're competing draft legal. So most of the audience here, probably that's at least within my sphere here, most of us are doing, the non-draft legal stuff, right? So draft legal, totally different style racing. That's what you were mentored to do. And you had some pretty good success on the world stage. Kind of talk about some of the highlights there.
Yeah, so and my entire triathlon career was just a series of like right place, right time, and it had nothing to do with like studying or working hard. I have to admit that, like, it was all like it just the perfect,
Serendipitous.
yeah, like the doors just opened, and I truly believe it's because I just went out of my comfort zone, like going to Europe, like just on a whim. I'd never traveled before, didn't know what I was doing, didn't speak the language, just went. And by doing that, that introduced me to this person, which introduced me to that person. And then just that opened up the line of communications. And like, if you're a good person and you meet good people, like, good things happen. That's kind of my life in a nutshell. So basically, from that stage, I got connected with Joel Filial. So we'll skip forward a little bit. We don't have to hear about all the racing and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
Joel Filial contacted me about he was starting a training group. And so for those of you who don't know, Joel Filio currently right now is one of the best draft legal coaches on the planet. He's got the most medals and world championship titles, and he has coached Olympic medalists. And at one stage, I forget if it was 2017 or 2018, one of those years he swept the men's podium on the World Triathlon Championship Series, which is the most competitive series in short course racing. And yeah, so incredible coach.
He's UK based, or where is he? UK? He's UK based, right?
Well, yeah, so all over the place, because
Okay.
he's kind of like myself and my wife, where he started this training group, and we're basically nomadic, where you find training locations that have good weather that you can train outdoors year round, and then you move locations based on where the races are. So a lot of it's European based because that's where a lot of the races are. But as an example, like when we first started, we were training in New Zealand or Australia, and like we would just move the camps as the like it would be winter in North America, but in or south of the
Hemisphere.
equator.
Yeah, South Hemisphere. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, southern
Yep.
hemisphere, we would have nice summer weather in December, so
Yep.
that type of thing. But basically, he contacted me about being the swim specialist of the group, and so I would basically bring a high level of swimming to this new group that he was starting, and then other athletes in the group would help me with the bike handling skills or with my run as we'd built. And so we kind of just built this group of athletes together that they weren't the best athletes in the world, but they were the best at specific things. And so that we would work together to create the best group. And so I started in his group in December of 2012,
Mm.
and it went on to, is still currently functioning and has some of the best athletes in the world, like multiple time world champions, and athletes who are on the overall series podium and getting, yeah, series medals and stuff like that. So I've been part of his group through from December 2012 until I still consider myself part of the group, because
Yeah.
my wife is now coached by him
Yeah.
when, yeah,
Well, let's
she
talk
started
about,
training.
yeah, let's talk about that. I was joking about that, the audience is listening now, but before we press record, how, just trying to do some prep work again, nothing about how your introduction to the sport of triathlon is on anything that's on the internet. Right. But the funny thing is I was joking about, to be married to Katie, she has a full Wikipedia page, a deep one, right? And then you've got a little one, even though you have an impressive background there. But let's kind of talk about how did you guys cross paths? I mean, was it through this group or whatever? Because Katie, did she also kind of come through a little bit more formalized talent ID program with Team USA, or how did she come into the play? And then obviously you guys cross paths, and then you guys are married and have a son together. So let's talk a little bit about that briefly.
Yeah, so to keep it short-ish, so I was with Joel, and then I met Katie in Tijavaras, Hungary, at a World Cup race there. We just met at an after party there and hit it off like crazy. Didn't stop talking after that, and then ended up like 1 year later we started dating. Or we started dating like 1 month after we met, and then dated for over a year. And right, like after a year anniversary, I asked her to marry me. She said yes, and then 3 months later we got married in 2015. So it was like a pretty quick 2013 met, 2014 engaged, 2015 married, like boom, boom, boom. And from that stage, I actually had an accident in 2014. I was racing in the heat and I had a virus that was not showing symptoms yet. So I didn't know I was sick. And then it was so hot and I was dehydrated. There's like perfect storm of events. At this race, I ended up having a seizure, a
Oh, wow.
heat stroke, and multiple seizures actually. And so I had to get airlifted, and I was in a coma for 19 hours and came out of it. And luckily, I survived, and I have all my memories, and all my organs are still working because doctors were surprised that A, I was alive, B, I didn't lose any organs, and then C, like I didn't lose my memory because I lost my memory for about a week and a half, maybe, from what I've told, from what I've been told, because I didn't have any idea what was going on, and Katie wasn't sure if I would remember her and stuff like that.
Oh,
But then
wow.
everything eventually came back, and so that made me take a step back from my own career, and that's kind of like right when my career was taking off too, which was kind of a bummer because I had just made it to like the highest level of racing and was still developing as an athlete. I still had plenty of years to develop, but that made me completely stop pursuing my own Olympic dream. And because that was at the same time that I met Katie, we ended up getting married, that next year. And then I just became her training partner. And that same stage, she had switched coaches to being coached by my coach, Joel Filial. And so that worked out well where I would just go to the camps and I was just purely a training partner. I was training with the swim with the top swimmers, the guys there. And then I was doing all the bikes and the run with whoever needed help, which obviously I would prioritize my wife, Katie. But then anybody else, I would just do extra stuff. So I was still training like an insane amount. And because of that, any races that were available that worked with my schedule around World Triathlon stuff. And at the same stage, I was working for a marketing company remotely. So I was able to do that and still travel and train with Katie.
Yeah.
But anything that worked with my schedule, I was able to just hop into a race and win some prize money here or there. So I only raced at the lowest level of race, so Continental Cup, which is the first level of World Triathlon racing.
Yeah.
And I just would race that because I knew I could do well and earn prize money. So
Damn you. You're one of
yeah,
those guys.
yeah, I would just show up and people are like, "Oh, great! Like swim's gonna be fast,
Tommy
and I'm
showed
just
up.
gonna ride as hard as I
Yeah.
can because I had nothing to lose and like whatever." So I just had a blast. Also, it was really cool because in retrospect, now that I look back, I didn't think about it at the time at all, but I got to race with a lot of the junior, like up and coming U.S. men, the athletes who are currently now racing the series.
Yeah.
And at that stage, like I didn't think of myself like as a mentor, but there was a lot of races that I was kind of being the authority on the bike, being like, all right, guys, we need to work together. Like, we got a gap and like, let's keep pushing. Like, you need to rotate through and like just kind of organizing everything because the lower level races, like these younger guys are just coming up. They don't really know what they're doing. They're just racing hard.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, for me, it was kind of a step down, like a couple steps since I had raced at the highest level. So, racing with them, I kind of was able to mentor them a little bit and
Yeah.
now see them coming to fruition at the highest level of triathlon racing is kind of cool. But I never expected that
Yeah. Well,
at the time.
yeah. Well, being sensitive to time here, let's then that's a perfect segue into now you're in charge of the talent ID program, right? So the audience clearly, Tommy has walked the walk and talks the talk, and then he's obviously married to, Katie, who's competing at the highest level, right? For beautifully for Team USA. Um, so where do you see, what are the plans and the goals of the program? I mean, I don't know if we want to bring in the couple kids that I have that I'm coaching. That's how you and I cross paths with Eleanor and stuff like that. I mean, what are we doing? We're going into 2024. It's an Olympic year. Not to say that the kids are involved in that, but I know there's been some recent changes within USA Triathlon. We're still waiting to hear for the race date for the junior elite championships, national championships, and stuff like that. I'm hoping that'll probably come out probably the beginning of the new year and stuff like that. But what's the plans for the program and who's in the program right now? I mean, how many kids and all that stuff, just to give a scale for the audience here. It's a big
Yeah.
select
Okay.
group.
Yeah, so this is kind of I'm going to try to keep this brief as possible.
Thank
But
you.
so the two things, one, my path, like as we kind of talked about, I was not part of any funded programs with USA Triathlon until I
Right.
qualified for the national team via results. Just because my age coming into the sport was a little bit late, like there's no way that they were just going to fund someone with I had no run background whatsoever. I just ran for junior lifeguard. So anyway, my
Yeah.
my progression through the path was like solely self-funded, I just had to do my own thing. Whereas the polar opposite was Katie. And when Katie came through the sport, she was found by Barb Lindquist, who was in charge of the collegiate recruitment program at the time.
Hall of Famer.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so Katie was found as being a Division I runner. She was a steeplechaser at Syracuse University, but had a significant swim background. So because of that, Barb Lindquist went out, contacted her coaches, got in touch with her, brought her to a camp, and then she was accepted into the program along with like Summer Rappaport and then Kirsten Casper, Renee Tomlin. There are a few other athletes that were on the national team and currently still are some of our top athletes. Like Summer Rappaport went to the Olympics in Tokyo as well.
Yep.
And they're still our highest performing athletes, these athletes that were found in 2013. So basically, Barb started this program along with the help of a few others, and they funded everything for these athletes. So they gave them a house to live in. They had a coach. It was like kind of a centralized environment. They would fly them to the different races, and they helped them progress through the sport. After that, kind of 2-3 years, the program changed. It shifted, and instead of focusing on like a few athletes and giving them tons of funding, it spread out to like having more athletes, giving them more opportunity, but less funding. So they wanted to what we call widen the net. So it's like, all right, we don't want to miss somebody that like just because they had lower level stats, like they might have fallen through. But because the lack of funding and like this being cut and that being cut, the program just wasn't quite working from, let's just say 2015 and on. And so then I was brought in. I got a job in the end of 2020, I believe, or end of 2021. I can't even remember years now anymore. But yeah, so I was brought in to kind of change up the program or figure out, all right, how do we get this program to be just as successful as it was in the past? And what are things that we're doing? So there's three main things. Well, I don't know if there's three, but there's main things that I'm focused on. A was the time standards. We didn't have updated time standards guides from when like Katie was recruited back in like 2010. So now we're looking at over 10 years later, the sport has changed drastically. As you alluded to, it's a very new sport. It's only been in the Olympics since 2000. So if there's been 10 or 11 years since 2000, that's almost half the life of Olympic triathlon being in the Olympics. And so the time standards need to be updated. And we found that like in the past, like 4 or 5 years, the athletes who were in the program were not up to standard, to the standard that like Katie and Gwen and Summer and those athletes were. So I went through and revamped all of the time standards and tried to figure out, all right, internationally, domestically, what are all these metrics that we have to do to figure out what is success in this program? And so there's two different things. There's one, it's collegiate, but then there's two where we need to start earlier. And so that moves us into the high school recruitment program where you and I kind of connected. So giving high schoolers the opportunity to find out what triathlon is, introduce them to the sport, connect them with coaches, give them a development pathway so that they can start in the sport earlier to be more successful in the long term. And then to answer your question about who's currently in the program, right now, we only have one athlete in the collegiate recruitment program who's like currently racing. So it went from when I started, there was 19 and 19 athletes. We got pared down basically like if they weren't able to hit metrics or they weren't able to hit what they needed to hit to stay in the part of the program, then they were removed. And certain athletes were removed based on their results from previous by USA Triathlon, like high performance and in general, just to kind of like revamp what the whole program is. But now the collegiate recruitment program is down to one athlete. In the future, starting next year, when people start graduating, we will have, I would say, around 6 or 7. And these athletes, none of them, like no athletes that I've found or from when I started are going to be Paris potentials. Mathematically, it's impossible. So my whole goal, my whole focus since I've started has been on Paris and then Brisbane 2032. So it's a very, very long-term plan. And what we're focusing on is getting athletes who, when they start, the goal is to get them from going from 0 to the national team in 2 years collegiately. And once they're on the national team, ideally there'll be a couple years or 1 year out from the Olympics, and they'll be at the top level of sport, and they'll be able to race well enough that they'll have a chance at qualifying for LA. And then for the high school athletes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one more quick question. The individual athlete, the one that's still in the collegiate program, female or
Male.
male? Male. Okay, so what's interesting there, because of just the dynamics at the collegiate level, again, for the audience here, Title IX and all that stuff, that triathlon is a now, as of this year, an NCAA women's program, women's only program, but it is very competitive at a rec club level nationally that has been traditionally men and women, but now it's really at the men's level, highly competitive. Some of the big marquee collegiate names, Division I names, have club teams with very competitive male athletes. And now there are scholarships that have been allocated over the last probably 10 years or so. I think UCLA was the first program that actually issued a scholarship for men. So that obviously is not a deterrent that it's not an NCAA program. You guys are still looking at the metrics. You're still looking at the potential, again, for Team USA, Olympic caliber potential. Doesn't matter men or women. So it's interesting that it's a male versus female because it is an NCAA program. Any comments to that, or the reasons why, or is just because we're just not hitting the metrics?
We have time standard guides, and if you can hit them, then yeah, you'll be considered. We do take into account, though, let's just say someone hits the swim times and they haven't swam before. That is insane talent. But let's say someone's been training for 10 years and they can't quite hit, or they just barely hit it. Like, we're taking that into account. So
Okay.
it's all based on progression of not just race results, or sorry, not just like training or data metrics, but on race results as well. So
Got
we've
it.
had some athletes who have insane numbers, like on time trials and stuff like that, but then they just can't put it together during a
One
race.
race.
So
Got it.
we need to make sure that we're supporting athletes who are able to kind of do both, which is a skill set in itself. But yeah, to be considered for anything is all based on the time standard guide, and it's obviously a rough, like, you don't have to hit an exact time and then you get everything. It's like, if you're close to this, then we consider you, and then we follow you, and we have conversations, and we talk through things, and we make sure that the athletes who are capable and performing are getting the support. And then the easiest way to say it is, like, we're not funding dreams. Like, everybody has the dream to be a professional. Everyone has a dream to go to the Olympics. Everyone has that dream, and we cannot afford that to do that for everyone, unfortunately. So it has to be very specific, and people have to earn that, and earn that right. So that's kind of where it comes down to. And it's male or female, doesn't matter if you're NC2A triathlete in doing actual triathlon, club triathlon, if you're doing a single
Yeah.
sport, if you're running, or if you're swimming, whatever the case is, like, you're being considered if you have proven that you're a high level athlete. So
Yeah, let's talk, for the audience too, when you're talking about, like, we can't afford to fund the dream for everybody, right? So again, clarification, there is money allocated within the budget within USA Triathlon, which is the governing body of the sport in the US, non-for-profit. Again, there's annual fees that I pay, all my other athletes, PacWest athletes, we're all paid to be an annual member and all that stuff. And so the budget's not huge. Let's just be honest. It's a couple million, probably more than that, but it's not tens. It's not, certainly not the NFL caliber type of organization. So, but you guys have taken allocations. I mean, one of the athletes that I'm coaching right now, which is how we cross paths, you're helping fund a coaching stipend to allow me to coach her. And you're also giving her a little bit of a stipend to encourage her, to fund her to race, to compete, and to continue to show that she's hitting the metric numbers of helping her realize the potential dream of her going to the next level, right? Which for her, she's junior elite. So 16 to 18 years of age, right? 16 to 19, I think is what the
19,
age group
yeah.
is. Yeah. And then that would hopefully move her in. And I know you and I talked about that. Either she goes the path of the next level, which would be collegiate. Either she pursues her traditional running career, cross country track. Great, because triathlon's always going to be there. Or now she has the opportunity for scholarship to go to some of these Division I or II programs that now have NCAA women's programs. Now she's got options. Now athletes have options there. But again, maybe talk a little bit about that briefly. I mean, she's one of just a handful of kids at the junior level right now that you guys are helping sort of fund right now, right?
Yeah, so the high school recruitment program is specifically for athletes who have never heard of triathlon. So the goal is to get world-class runners with a swim background. They have to hit world-class standards in both swimming and running, which, as you alluded to, is very few athletes in the whole United States. I think this year I only found 4 or 5, like total. And so if you're part of that and you've never heard of triathlon, we want to make sure that you know what it is. You get to experience a camp, you get to find out the love, the community, and everything that triathlon has to offer. The second part of that is it's very expensive. So there's a lot of kids and parents who aren't able to afford to even just try it to see if they liked it. So we're kind of banking on, all right, if we're able to support you to just get started and it's something you find out you love and are passionate about, you'll pursue that because that's where your heart wants. And so if we're able to invest in these athletes in the beginning stages and help them just get to the point where now they have the opportunity to get a scholarship going to college for NC2A triathlon. They have a opportunity to get a scholarship for running Division 1, and then they could do triathlon in the summer, or they could do
Yep.
collegiate club triathlon. They could work with a coach and just go to school or online school and be a professional triathlete. They could do like whatever they want. There's no one path that is the correct path.
Right.
There's so many paths in the sport of triathlon that whatever works for you, whatever you find joy in, that's what we try to push you towards. We just want you to be happy, especially as being a young athlete. Like, you don't want to get burnt out right away. You don't want to feel like, all right, this is a job for me. When you're 17 years old, like, this needs to be fun 100%. So that's our goal, is to just continue to make triathlon fun for them, affordable, and just give them the opportunity.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's a good segue in. So the beginning of this new year, January 1st, New Year's Day is on a Monday. In particular, there's a camp, there's a junior elite camp. I know you kind of inherit that at the last minute, but I know you're not coaching it. There's like 3 or 4 youth level coaches that are coming, but there's an elite, a high performance draft legal camp that's going on. That's going to be down in North Carolina, so near you, because you're now in North Carolina at the University of North Carolina Charlotte campus at the Performance Sports Center, and the campus there. And then that's going to segue into USA Triathlon hosts an annual conference called Endurance Exchange, which I'm attending. And so the cool thing there is if you got that going on, and I think it's just a select group of kids, right? There's 20 or so kids that have been invited out. USA Triathlon is funding these kids to come on out. So I know you talked briefly before we got on the call how there is a little bit of transition from competitive youth athletes, 13 to 15, I think is sort of that sweet spot age group, that are involved in the triathlon. They're involved in the draft legal part, but then we found that there's a little bit of engagement that gets lost going into the next junior phase of age group. So this is like, these camps are like sort of a bridge to keep the engagement, keep the enthusiasm, keep the fun nature of bringing all these kids together. So maybe talk briefly about what the purpose of the camp is, and what you've seen in terms of success level of this, because I got not just one, but because of you, I got Peyton, who's my other top boy out here in Reno, Tahoe area. You got them both going. And so I think they're 2 of only 20 that are going out there. So they're super excited to go together. So it's cool. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the camp that's happening is basically when the youth athletes, the top youth athletes in the United States, age up to juniors. So going from 15 to 16 to 19, you go from being the top dog in in your category to being one of the youngest, the smallest, the littlest, because you're 16 years old and you're racing against 19-year-olds. That's a big difference when in development. So what we found in the past, when I say we, I mean USA Triathlon, is that the athletes who aged up and all of a sudden went from being the best to being the worst kind of fell out of love with the sport. So we want to make sure that they just keep the love, keep the passion for it. So by offering them the opportunity to come to a high level, what we would consider a national development camp, and just show them some love. Say, hey, we see you. We believe that you could be very good, but please know that it's going to be very hard the next few years because you are going to be the youngest, but that's a good thing because then you have room to develop, you have room to grow. It's something that's going to challenge you, something for you to work towards. But then also, like, they're going through all of it together. When you bring them all together at a camp, It's not just like going to a race where you see each other and you're like, oh, they're my competitors here. Now you guys are all aging up together and you kind of feel like a family. Like, all right, we're all doing this together. We're all going to be, 16 years old next year, and then like going for the 19-year-olds. Like, let's do this together. So we just want to keep that camaraderie, and showcase to them that we do care and that we believe in them, so that they'll stick around for maintaining being a triathlete.
Well, the cool thing there is you pointed that out. I mean, when you and Katie, got involved, 2014, 15, I mean, that core group then is now still competing at the highest levels now, not 8, 9 years later, right? And so all of those friendships are lifelong friendships, right? I mean, you and I have thrown out names of other people that have been in the ITU or the ITU, now World Triathlon, formerly ITU, International Triathlon Union, that, you guys are, it's all part of this exclusive family. So that's what's really cool about, Peyton and Eleanor that's going out there. Hopefully those teammates that they're training with at this camp, become lifelong friendships, right? Whether or not they stay in the program or not. So that's really cool about that, creating that community.
And
That
I did
said,
want to say one more
yeah,
thing on that.
yeah,
So the high school recruitment program this year only had 4 women involved, 4 girls. And those 4 girls have been essential for recruitment for me. They are the most, like, they met each other. They were best friends before they even met each other. They started a text thread. They text all the time about triathlon and races and like this, that, the other thing. And so now every time I have a new athlete coming in, these girls are, I'm like, hey, is it okay if I connect you? And I connect them, and these girls sell the sport. And the new ones coming in, like guys, girls, doesn't matter. These girls are like, this was the best camp I've ever been to. It changed my life. You have
right.
to try this. And like, I'm
Love it.
not doing much anymore.
Yeah,
Like, obviously, I still am doing my job, but they
yeah.
are just over the top, like the cherry on top, that are continuing to just spread the love of the sport, of what triathlon brought to them. And that's been huge for me. So yeah, Eleanor, another girl, Addison Knobloch, and Kenzie, they are, man, fantastic. It's been, yeah, amazing. So
Super cool. It'll be interesting to have this, podcast 5, 6 years from now to see where they're at. Right. We'll put that on the calendar, because of just the history you talked about with Katie and you and all the other athletes that you've been in a relationship with. That said, we're getting on to the end of time here. So sensitive to that, the camp then leads into, so they come in on Tuesday the 2nd, camp Wednesday, Thursday, maybe something on Friday morning, and then the kids fly back home on Friday afternoon. I'm coming in Thursday, and as well as you, because on Friday going in through Sunday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, is the USA
endurance
Triathlon
exchange.
Endurance
Yeah.
Exchange. And so there's a whole massive list of parallel speakers talking about different subjects. So there's a whole speaker line there that's just action packed both days. So I can't wait to go through all that. Obviously I can't attend all of them, so I'm picking and choosing, but there's some camps that you're doing too, to talk about maybe the strength of like what you're of the 3 disciplines, swimming camp and stuff like that. So what are you doing in maybe high level, maybe even talk on behalf of USA Triathlon? What's the purpose of the camp and everything there? Because it caters to coaches, which I'm wearing one cap, and then it also caters to race directors, which I'm wearing the other cap, which is a whole nother conversation of what I'm doing to help you in the sport with some of this draft legal racing on the West Coast. But kind of talk about what you're doing going into that weekend. What do I
Yeah.
expect?
Yeah, so Endurance Exchange is basically the camp that I just explained, but for coaches and race directors. Like,
Cool.
we
Yeah.
we want to make sure that the coaches and race directors, because let's say I find all these athletes, then where do they go? What do they do? Like, we have to have coaches, we have to have races for them to participate in. So making sure that the coaches have all the update information about everything that's going on, and the connections, them networking, getting to know one another, race directors networking, talking about things that work, things that didn't, dates of races. Just, the world is your oyster when you go there to communicate with the other coaches and race directors about what's going on for the year and planning, and not just the year, but like planning until 2028 or 2032, even just like having this long-term vision, and how do we execute that, and then how do we all work together to create this pathway for future athletes that are coming through. And then we also have, other coaches or race directors who have been through all of this for the last long time, doing some clinics and doing some talks. So I'm actually there as part of USA Triathlon to do a talent ID talk. So I'll talk through my program, the process that I go through, what the stages of development are, what metrics we're looking for, what I would expect of coaches who are working with Talent ID athletes, and what we expect them to teach and learn in timeline. Basically the whole process of talent identification, from not just finding the athlete, but all the way through the mentoring them until the highest level.
Awesome.
And then the next thing I'll do an in-pool session where we'll just talk through how do you get good swimmers to become great? Because there's a lot of information out there on how to make like someone who doesn't know how to swim know how to swim, or someone who's a beginner into intermediate, or, but there's not really, all right, how do you become a great swimmer from being a good swimmer? Or if you see a swimmer who has like great technique, but they're just like, are missing that couple percentage, how do we get that? And so I'll be talking through quite a few different tips and tricks for that.
Can't wait. No, really looking forward to it. It's a great way to kick off the new year on many different levels. Selfishly for me, because I've got the kids going there too. So I can't wait. And finally I get a chance to see you in person and stuff like that. So looking forward to it. We talked about this. We're going to segue to the superstar of this conversation, which is Katie. Is she going to be there by chance, or is it just you?
I believe she will be there. I think she's either talking or going to a USAT foundation. I don't know, but we need to figure out childcare as well. So
Yeah,
we'll
I was gonna
talk
say,
through all those
yeah, yeah.
logistics
Well, I
soon.
experienced that. I'll watch Kimble for a little bit if I get a chance to see you and Katie
Yeah.
too. On that note, let's just kind of wrap up with just Katie. Of the qualification standards to make it onto Team USA, again, 3 slots, right? And then there's an alternate slot, typical, prototypical for any Olympic sport to try to go into the Olympics. And obviously for the audience, it's Paris next year, right? Spectacular setting. Where are we at with her qualifications? What does she have coming up? What does she need to do to punch that ticket? How close is she? I know Gwen is also trying to get that ticket as well too. The only person that's qualified, I think, is it Taylor? Is that right? Or
Taylor
yeah,
Knibb, yeah.
yeah. So kind of talk about that, and then maybe we'll wrap up with that.
Yeah, so on the women's side, they have 3 spots that they earned because they're all ranked very high. Right now, the US women have like 7 women in the top 40 in the world, but only
Wow.
3 can go. And then at the highest level of racing, the championship series, only 5 athletes per country are allowed. So last year, Katie was coming back from having Kimble. So it was her first year racing after 18 months out. Gwen, same thing, had her second child. And so she was coming back and had no points. So they had to race just kind of all over the place to try to just get their ranking up domestically to even get starts at the highest level. And so it was kind of a race within a race, because domestically these athletes need to get their ranking up, because internationally their ranking's totally fine. But so where we're at right now, complicated, but Katie is 7th American. She had an unfortunate disqualification, a controversial one actually, at the end of the year, that she had actually won the race, and she beat Gwen. And the reason she went there was to beat Gwen, because she needed to get those points, and she needed to take points away from Gwen to even get a start at the Olympic trials next year. So because she was disqualified, she didn't get any of those points. Gwen got bumped up to 1st from 3rd. And so Gwen got more points and hopped her in the domestic rankings. So now Gwen is 5th American and Katie is 7th. So now Gwen can get a start at any championship series races she wants. She can just put her name on the start list, but Katie can't get on unless it's not a full start list. So now Katie needs to figure out what her schedule is going to look like. And so as of right now, we don't know, because it's going to be very complicated in order to get enough points to get into the Olympic trials events. The Olympic trials events are in May. They have one more automatic spot that you can qualify. So as you said, Taylor Knibb qualified in Paris last year at the Paris test event. So that means there's 2 more spots available for the women. One of the spots you could automatically qualify if you're the top American on the podium in Yokohama, Japan in early May. And then the 3rd event that will be taken into consideration is in Cagliari, Italy. And so that 3rd event does not have an auto selection, but it will be a discretionary selection from the US, and they'll take into account results at those 2 races. And there's one more race in Abu Dhabi in March that will also be taken into consideration. So let's just say that nobody auto qualifies in Yokohama. That means there's 2 spots that are going to be discretionary. And USA Triathlon can determine whether or not they want to pick somebody for the individual race that they believe could be a medalist, or people that they believe could be competitive to earn a medal in the mixed team relay.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
So if one person auto qualifies in Yokohama, there'll be one discretion. If nobody auto qualifies, there's going to be two discretion. So I really hope that one person auto qualifies, because discretion is always ugly with committees and voting, and yeah,
Well, it's
it's
complicated
just
because
never.
you have 7 U.S. women that are competing at the highest levels right now. You only had 3, then it's an easy decision, right? They're the 3, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's totally complicated. Obviously, we're rooting for you and Katie to put it all together. Obviously, we won't know until she's got a race, so we'll figure that part out. But great way to wrap up, Tommy. Super awesome. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to do this again, maybe on the backside of obviously the endurance exchange and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of other tangents we can go off on, but I appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing the phenomenal background on your introduction into the sport. And, thank you from USA triathlon coach and athlete and all that stuff, race director, of what you do and your team, what you guys are doing right now. It's super exciting, and really appreciate what you've done and what you're continuing to do. Excited to see what the future is. So
Yeah, thanks
awesome.
so much, Jay. I'm looking forward to updating you with all these Olympians that we're going to have down the
Yeah,
pipeline.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, and well, happy holidays to you and Katie. Kimble should be fun with Christmas coming up, especially with an 18-year-old son running around on Christmas Day. Super fun stuff. So all the best to you and Katie. Obviously, Tommy, I'll see you in a few weeks in North Carolina for the conference and the camp and stuff like that. But I appreciate your time. Happy holidays
Yeah,
to you, my friend.
thank you, Jay. Talk
Yeah,
to you later.
cheers.